the core focus is on how we can bring more love into our lives, more connection, greater depth of understanding, both of ourselves, because it really starts there, but then also in particular with the people who are closest to us and who mean the most to us, or may not be the closest to us right now, but we wish they were. And very often, the missing ingredient in terms of creating the depth and quality of relationship that we want to experience is what I call the platinum rule. And I thought that this was an expression that I'd come up with myself. And then I found that the platinum rule was out there as another thing. And so I think actually what happened was I'd been thinking on the thing, I saw it somewhere over time, and then it stuck in my mind in that way. But we're actually today going to be touching on three different levels of what we could talk about as being a solid foundation for creating rich relationships. And there's the golden rule level, which many of us already know about and have probably explored before. It's common across all religions pretty much. Then there's the platinum rule, and that's where we're really going to be focused for the most part. But we'll also touch on something which is another step beyond that, which I call the diamond rule today as well. And really, our goal, apart from enriching our relationships, is to become increasingly responsible in terms of the way that we show up for others and for ourselves, and the ways that we support other people to be able to show up for themselves as well, to be able to meet their own needs. Hey, Andrew, if you're watching me on Facebook, because I just saw that you're liking the video, appreciate that. Yeah, Laura! All right, so cool to have you here. We're going to be talking to each other on the other side, I believe, as well today. So good that we're getting to share the morning together. So as I said, we're going to be touching across these different areas of what I'm calling the golden rule, the platinum rule, and the diamond rule. Other things that we're going to be touching on today, very briefly, we will touch in again on conscious communication. What is conscious communication? It's a term that I think has lost a lot of substance, perhaps we could say, because we just, oh, conscious communication, I know what that means, but have we stopped to break that down? So we'll touch in on that. We'll also explore what I call the three eyes of possibility. Not eyes as in these eyes, although they are kind of like that as lenses, but the three eyes in terms of I words. Now, before anything else, I think it's important that we start by recognizing that while we're going to be really talking about communication today, which is like my core passion, how can we become effective communicators? And I know this really starts with our relationship with ourselves and how we communicate with ourselves. When we're talking about practicing something such as the platinum rule, which we'll come back to in terms of its meaning and significance, what we really need to be checking in with from the outset is our intentions. What are our intentions as a communicator? And very often we can find that our intentions are to meet our own personal needs. And now that is a perfectly legitimate way for us to go about communication. I think it's important that we start from the outset with an intention of contribution as a communicator. That what we are communicating, why we are communicating, is to contribute to others, to contribute to relationship, to contribute to our own and other people's well-being. And if we can see inside of our communication that our intention is otherwise, our communication, excellent, great to have you with me, Stephanie, with us, three of us here in the Valley, Laura over in France. Are you still across the road from Thich Nhat Hanh in Plum Village, Laura? Excellent. So anyway, I've just been creating a frame for us, Stephanie, in terms of different elements of communication that we're going to be exploring. But really what I've just been touching on is the importance of our intention as communicators, that we start with the intention of contribution inside of anything that we're going into, because if we are not seeking to contribute to the well-being of ourselves, others, and the world as communicators, chances are things are not going to go well for us, others, or the world. And so really, we're starting off with this seed element of intentionality. It reminds me of a story to do with Buddha, actually, Laura, which is Buddha was talking to somebody about what is the most important thing in terms of considering the goodness or the badness of our actions or of what we do in life. And one person was saying actions is where we need to put most of our attention, because actions have the greatest solidness, or they're the most tangible or powerful thing that we can do. But then Buddha made the point, well, if you stepped on an insect without knowing that you were doing it, is that really a bad action? Compared to if you stepped on the insect knowing that you were going to do it and intending to harm it. And therefore, the most important thing is, as he rounded out to say, is our intentions inside of anything that we're up to. Same goes with our communication. So before anything else, it's very important that we are considering, what are our intentions in life? What are our intentions inside of any relationship? And as those of you, well, this is pretty much you, Laura, those of you who have done things with me over time, you'll know I talk about something that I call effective perspective. And that is a perspective that works well for ourselves, others, and the greater whole. And the same thing happens when we're talking about communication. Is this serving me, others, and the greater whole? And if we don't get ticks across all three of those criteria, chances are that's where our work lies. Then we've got a reframing to do. Now, all of that being said, let's start inside of this intentionality, going beyond contribution. We'll touch on the importance of empathy and really compassion. And this is to say that if we are wanting to create rich relationships with others, it really starts with our willingness to have an open mind in order to see life from other people's perspectives, having an open heart, being willing to feel others and to be unguarded enough to be felt, to have our own vulnerability felt. And then the third part of deep compassion and empathy is having an open will, which means to me that we are willing to be influenced by and not only focused on influencing others. Because very often, many of us go into communication thinking about, what do I want other people to know so they can meet my needs, so that I can communicate what I want. So in a sense, I can influence something to go in the direction that I want it to. But if we are seeking to be influential as communicators, if we want to be ethical, it means that we need to be influenceable as well. And all of this will tie together as we come back and talk about the platinum rule later. But we're really starting here on these twin pillars of intentionality, one of them being to contribute and the other one being compassion, having compassion for ourselves and others. So I'm going to leave those there with us. But I put out there that if we were to stop this right now and walk away and simply ask ourselves, how can I focus on showing up as a contribution, and how can I focus on compassion in my life, we would already have something very rich for us to take forward in life from this moment forward. Having said all of that, we're going to be covering today a variety of things, and at the heart of it is really three core skills, and I call them the three eyes of possibility. Laura, you might have encountered this with me. I don't know if we've touched on this before, but I like learning tools, and so what we can see in the word possibility is I. So the three eyes of possibility, we've got an anchor right there in the word, because there is three eyes inside of the word possibility. So what are they? And so we've already been talking about this first one, but when we want to practice the platinum rule or loving communication, it starts with having clear and good intentions and being able to even express our intentions. The next major skill that we want to be able to practice effectively is invitation. Who here has played with nonviolent communication? Good, great, awesome. So we've got some shorthand here. This is requests. Yeah, so invitations is in a sense just what we might call a warmer form of the word request. It's an invitation for somebody to join us in something or to do something, yeah? Which sounds to me a little bit more inviting than requesting. So we go with invitation there, and of course it fits my 3I model. And then the third key element here to be able to have communication that invites in new possibilities is inquiry. So these are three things that we want to be able to practice really well as communicators, being able to express our intention in regards to a communication or for what we're wanting to bring to a relationship, being able to invite in possibilities, make requests, basically be clear in terms of what we're seeking to create inside of a relationship, and then asking good questions, really getting in the other person's world. And so if we can focus on these three things, we will create a language of possibility. Possibilities that we can bring to something through our intentions, possibilities that we can co-create through our invitations, and possibilities that can come to us through others from the questions that we ask. So we're going to be coming into these things in a more practical way as we go forward. But to begin with, let's talk about the golden rule, because there wouldn't be this conversation about the platinum rule if we didn't already have the golden rule. So what's your understanding of the golden rule? I imagine that you all are already familiar with the idea of the golden rule. Is there anybody who would like to jump in and share what the golden rule means to you? We're going to hear a lot of my voice, so I'd love to hear some of yours. And it's okay if not. As I think I've told some of you before, my dad called me motor mouth when I was little, and it hasn't stopped. So I'm going to go on a countdown. Great, Stephanie. What's the golden rule mean to you? And welcome to the space.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, just, to treat others the way you'd like to be treated.
Great. Now, what do you see as being effective about that, and what might its shortcomings be?
Well, what's effective is that there's an intention of doing no harm.
Mm-hmm.
The drawback is that we're all different people, and what might not be harmful communication for me might feel threatening to someone else.
Very much so. And so whether it's harm, or whether it's avoiding harm, or doing that which would have be done to us, in either instance, you're right. You're absolutely right that on the one hand, it's helpful because it can give us a frame to work with, but on the other hand, the frame might not be a shared frame. For example, I know many people, especially living here in Pai and this alternative, on the Farang community side over here in Thailand, the foreigners tend to be quite affectionate people. And if they were going through a tough moment, perhaps they would appreciate somebody, if they didn't even know them that well, coming over and engaging with them in some kind of close, intimate kind of way. But if we were to take the same principle and take some kind of close, intimate contact towards somebody who comes from a religion where they go, you do not touch this or that person inside of this religion, we'd be actually creating a real difficulty for that person. So the golden rule is helpful because it puts our mind into a creative space of going, what's the best I can do and what can I avoid? But it also means that we are, in a sense, projecting our own desires onto other people. Now, this is all over the place. We can see it in Buddhism. Do not treat others in ways that we would find hurtful to ourselves. Christianity, do unto others as you'd have done unto you. Confucianism, do not do unto others what you do not want done to yourself. So you can see it going both directions in terms of desire or avoidance of harm, as you were talking about a moment ago, Stephanie, or actually the creation of or stepping into actions which do have merit or benefits to others. Now, I've literally got quotes here that come from Christianity, Confucianism, Hinduism, Islam, Jainism, Judaism, Oglala Siyu, which is like Lakota from a Native American, Sikhism, Taoism, and we won't go over all of them because they're all pretty much the same. Now, the beauty of the golden rule is that it's much more scalable. Yeah? What do I mean by that? I mean, we can reflect on what's the best I can give to others and what are the actions I can refrain from or the things that I can refrain from, and take that with us everywhere. Whereas the platinum rule, the key to the platinum rule is finding out from others how they want to be treated and what their boundaries are, what they don't want us to do, and doing the same in like kind for them. But we can't do that with everybody. If you go into the supermarket, we're not going to stop before we pay to say, hey, how would you like me to interact with you today before we go ahead and have this conversation? It doesn't work that way. And so basically the point is that the golden rule is easy for us to take everywhere because it's something that we can do through personal reflection and it stays there. When we get to the platinum rule, we're going to be looking at how this is something that we really are focused on taking into the relationships, where we have the time and space and opportunity to actually explore each of our desires in a more thorough and deep way. And so where we're going to be spending most of our time today is in that second place. But we do want to spend a bit of time here on the golden rule, because that is the way that we are going to be showing up inside of our day-to-day experience with actually the lion's share or the majority of people that we ever meet. And so that's why I still want to honor the golden rule and not dismiss it at all, because it's the best we can do inside of a world which is very full of people. At the same time as that, it's not the best we can do with the people who are closest to us. And in fact, it's often the worst we can do with the people that are closest to us, because then we're operating from expectation and projection rather than from understanding and connection. So we'll come back to this. Now, we're going to do a little exercise in order to be able to look at what your thoughts are about how you can best practice the golden rule. So do you each have a pen and paper there that you can use for reflection? Or otherwise, if you've got twinkle fingers and you want to do it onto your keyboard, you're welcome to do it that way as well. But we're going to go into a little reflective process now. And before we do so, I think it's helpful for us to start with the space that we're living from right now, to start with attuning ourselves to what we might call a golden space inside, and then we can bring the space that we're living from into the reflective process. So let's do a brief meditation together, and then we'll go from the meditation into the reflection from there. So essentially what we'll do is we'll do a meditation in which I orient us mindfully towards our breath, bringing us into a deeper, more relaxed space. And then I'm going to invite in the image of a golden orb being alive inside of us. And then we will come out of that space gently and go into a reflective process together. Give me a little nod if that sounds good to you. We good with that? Sweet, thank you. All right, so to begin with, let's take a moment, bring our attention directly to the passage of breath in and out through our nose and or throat. And we're going to deepen down into the body now by bringing our awareness to the shifting sensations in our chest and upper back, the rise and fall with the tides of our breath. And relaxing down into the body. More and more deeply as we go. And now we float our awareness down into our belly, lower ribs, mid and lower back, and feel the rise and fall of this part of our body with our breath. If you feel any tension or guardedness, any charge that can be let go of, effortlessly allow it to fall away. And if it wants to stay, welcome it to be there all the same. And now bringing awareness down to the pelvis, down to the buttocks, right down to the base of our body and being, relaxing right down. As you're ready, allowing yourself to really be alive to your breath and sensations throughout your whole torso, from the breath sensations as the breath comes into your body, all the way down through your chest and belly and right down to your perineum. And now imagining that all of this that you can feel, all this realm of being that you can feel, is part of one glowing, beautiful orange orb, one big golden ball, like the sun. Start to feel that there is a solar radiant energy animating you, giving you life, and that you can feel it pouring out of you, in front of you, behind you, to either side of you, down from you into the earth, up from you into the sky. A golden energy. And you're here to shine this light into the world. And so we're going to bring this solar radiant energy into our reflection now, feeling ourselves alive in this way. And I invite you to, in a sense, now anchor the feeling of being open and generous in all directions. And if, whilst we go through the reflection, you find your sense of self collapsing to your brows, tightening between your eyebrows and getting heady, relax, come back to this golden ball kind of feeling, this open center of golden radiance, and then come back to the reflection. As you're ready though now, allow yourself to gently open your eyes and bring your awareness to your page, and I'm going to pass some questions over to you. They're very practical questions. How do you want others to listen to you? When someone's listening to you, how do you want others to listen to you? And if the answer is very short, that's cool. If you've got more to say, that's cool too. How do you want others to listen to you? And next up, how do you want others to question you? How do you want to be inquired into? Do you want people to ask you questions aggressively without permission? Or would you prefer that they ask them with earnest curiosity? I leave it to you. How do you want other people to ask you questions, to inquire? I know that everything is context-based. We're doing our best in this circumstance to play in a general sense with something that can be quite specific. That's okay. How do you want others to speak to you? You might be like, well, it depends where we are and what we're doing, and that's fair too. But how would you like others to speak to you? Next up, how do you want others to look at you? Sometimes if we're struggling to get a response on something like this, we can go the opposite. Well, how don't I? So how do I? And continuing with the sensorial reflection, how do you want others to touch you? And it's fine if you find that, like, I want other people to look at me with presence. You probably want them to touch you with presence as well. It's fine if we find the same thing repeated. It makes sense. Now, I've shared each of these questions with you, and I'm going to share these questions in the Facebook page that's associated with this. But this last one, we're going to go one more question here. And this one's a little bit different because all of them have been directly to you. This one is more about you, but when you're not there. How do you want other people, or how do you want others to talk about you? Now, we've got one final thing to check in on. This one's a little bit juicier than the others because it's focusing on another person and what we can learn on them. And therefore, there's a variety of ways that they may show up in life that are things we can learn from. So the first question is, who is someone you admire? Ideally that you know well enough. Yeah, like Stephanie, I know that you had a great teacher down in Kopangan who you've talked about with a glowing energy of respect. That's somebody that you've had enough experience with that would be able to be a guide for this kind of thing. So who is someone you admire? And then we can ask, how do they treat others? So we're looking for a third person example of the golden rule in action. Who's someone you admire? How do they treat others? Can you each think of somebody? Yeah, Aida, you got somebody in mind? Great. Now, in the interests of us balancing breadth with depth, we're going to keep on going forward, but that doesn't mean that we have plumbed the depths of where you can go to with these questions. But I'm hoping you can see how practical these questions were. How do you want to be listened to? How do you want to be spoken to, etc.? Because if we can be clear with ourselves about what we want to receive in this way, we can also be clear about what it means to uphold our own standards, to not live with double standards, where on the one hand, we want this for ourselves, on the other hand, we're not giving it to others. Yeah? And so this is a great place to start. And so the golden rule gives us a good access here. What can we do to be able to practice the other version of the golden rule? It's not, it's kind of clunky language to say that there is a positive version and a negative version of the golden rule because they're both positive. But if we're talking about negative in terms of what we don't want, then you just take each of those things. How don't you want to be listened to? I don't want people to pretend that they're listening to me whilst they're occupied with other things. I don't want to be having people listen in order to reply rather than listen to understand. Yeah. How don't I want to be spoken to? I don't want to be spoken to like I'm an idiot. I don't want to be spoken to in ways that diminish my value or worth, etc. And so what we can do with each of the things there is basically, how do you just stick in the N/T or N''T, and you've got the inverse question to give you more wisdom. Of course, something like this can be something which is just like a wind that blows on by and has no substance to it, unless not only do we reflect on it, or not only do we write it, but we reflect on it and refer back to it. Yeah? Because all of our egos likes the fact potentially right now that we are focused on things which raise our awareness. That's good for the ego. Oh, I'm engaged with awareness-based practices. But if we want it to go deeper than our ego and identity, then we actually put it into practice. We come back to it and ask ourselves again and make sure that we actually are upholding the very standards that we stand for. Yeah. Now, what's another way that we can bring our best to relationships. We can reflect on, and I've touched on this in other lives before and in other spaces, but we can reflect on how we show up already across 4 key areas. And I call this the lips of communication, which I think, Laura, you would already know about here. And it's going to look similar to some stuff we've already touched on here. But the lips of communication are listening, inquiry, presence, and speech. And so, a gold platinum alloy, bringing the two metals together, it would be, this is a way of us starting that process of moving into the platinum space by focusing on specific relationships and asking ourselves, how do I listen to this person? You know, Faida, you and I, as parents, we could think about our child and go, or for me, our children, and go, how do I listen to them habitually? What level of listening do I offer? When do I listen well? When don't I? What questions do I ask? Are these the questions I want to be asking? What other questions could I ask? Yeah. On the present side, how present am I? How else could I be present? What else could I be present to? And speech, how do I speak to, etc. And so, if we're wanting to take a step towards responsible relationships, we think about these things and ask ourselves, how am I showing up across these key areas where most of communication takes place? In the way that we listen, in the way that we ask, in what we're present to, and in the way that we speak. And so I'm just popping that there to say that this is a powerful place for us to begin when we're focusing on a relationship. Most people who are having difficulties in relationship that I work with begin from the premise of their complaints and what they want the other person to change. And it's difficult to begin there because it's beyond your control. So it's not necessarily helpful, because the only thing that you can shift, that you have the greatest likelihood of being able to shift, is the way you listen, the questions you're asking, how you're present, and how you speak. And so we begin with what we bring. Yeah. And I suppose what I'm saying is, because all 4 of us work with people in a one-on-one or one-to-group context, what we've done so far is powerful work for your clients to consider. How do they want to be spoken to? Are they doing that themselves as well? And inside of this little framework here, how do they show up in their relationships already? And what I tend to find is that when we turn the lens in this direction of how am I doing those things already, we're already more than halfway towards transformation, because responsibility is in the house, which is very different to, I want to learn how to set my boundaries, which is an important thing to do. I want to learn how to make my requests, which is an important thing to do, but it misses the mark in terms of, well, how does the other person see this situation? And are you bringing your best, which will give you the social capital to then be able to do the other things too? If we start from, this is what I want, the other person is likely to be like, great, you've jumped straight to what you want, and in the process negated me, my reality, and what I want. Does this make sense, guys? Why it's important for us to start with begin with what we bring and take responsibility for that. And that's a key important principle for our when we're working with our clients. Now let's talk. I know it's taken me 35 minutes to get here in an explicit way, but now let's talk about the platinum rule. Now, as I said earlier, it's better than the golden rule when we can practice it. Why? Because it goes beyond assumption. What I've seen is, I've worked as a couples coach/therapist over the years, and one of the things that I've found again and again is that most battles take place through 2 people having differing expectations. They've got different expectations of one another, and then they mistake their expectation as being what the other person should do, even if the other person hasn't agreed to it. One person has an expectation that they should have long eye-gazing style conversations with each other, while the other person has an expectation that they want space in terms of when they come home, they actually need to have a psychic space around them rather than a psychic connection come towards them. And so then these two expectations, just an example of how two different expectations can lead to a place of feeling like there is a complete mismatch. And what needs to generally take place is the expectations need to be surfaced, the needs that are underneath those expectations need to be explored, and then agreements need to be created that can meet those needs. But if we start from the first space of this is what I want and it's right from my perspective, well, this is what I want and it's right from my perspective, we can just battle that out. You should be more like this. You should be more like that. You shouldn't tell me what to do. You shouldn't tell me what to do. Yeah? And what is really being asked for from each person is, can you please see me and my needs and then find a way to creatively with me work on those needs together? And if we don't do that effectively, we can have people who are together and apart. You know, they are together physically and apart psychically for years. Yeah? Sadly, often beyond death. Very often people don't find the way to bridge the assumptions they're throwing at one another. But this is what the platinum rule does. So what we're seeking to do is honor people on their terms. Love them on their terms. You're all familiar with the love languages, the 5 love languages. We're going to go a little bit beyond the 5 love languages today. I've got a horrendously long acronym. I call it spaghetti. And spaghetti extends the 5 love languages by a few. And so we'll come back to spaghetti. But for now, we're focusing on the platinum rule. And so what we're seeking to do when we're practicing the platinum rule as an inquirer, we are seeking to understand from others how we can best love them. It's like, we're saying to them, teach me how to love you. Teach me how to honor you. Now just turn that around for a moment and imagine somebody came to you and said, I want to know how you receive love and how I can best honor you and what you want me to bring to our relationship so that I can deeply consider it and do my best to meet that for you. How would that feel to have somebody bring that to you? Is good, yeah? And so what's our role in life is to think again, golden rule wise, well, I would like that, so let me give that. Begin with what you can bring. Begin with what you bring. And the first thing we can bring is an honest curiosity. Help me to love you. How can I best love you? How can I best support you? And so what we would do here is, and so we're not going to practice this one today because why? Because your practice buddy isn't here with you. Your practice buddy is the people that you're in relationship with in life. You see, we can practice the golden rule by ourselves, but for the platinum rule, we need somebody else. Yeah? We can practice it with one another in terms of we can express to others what we would want for ourselves. We can practice making our requests. But here in the chat, I'm just going to pop down a bunch of questions that we could bring to somebody else. So can you all see that? I'm going to read them out in case there's anybody who's watching this in replay. And these questions are, how can I best support you within our relationship? What would you like me to do more of? What would you like me to do less of? What would you like me, is there anything you would like me to start doing? And what else? Is there anything you would like me to stop doing? And what else? Is there anything you've been wanting to tell me but have been holding back? If so, would you be willing to share it? You see, when we ask somebody to take us through each of these things, what tends to happen for many people is they go, I think I can risk telling you that I'd like you to stop, I don't know, gargling phlegm at the back of your throat when you're 1 foot away from my ear. That one feels okay because, it's understandable why I wouldn't like that one. But I might feel that it's much more sensitive territory to ask you to, stop. I'm going to talk about something which is a common one in terms of the male-female side of things. And that is like, and I've been guilty of this over time, and that is, I'd like you to stop rushing towards getting to the act of sex and rather take our time in terms of building our depth of connection and intimacy and have that unfold from there. Now that's a tougher one to potentially ask in terms of a stopping or a starting, because it can be like, oh shit, I've done something wrong. That's going to trigger shame potentially in the other person. And so when we're asking somebody else, what would you like me to start or stop? Very often they might be holding something in their back pocket going, I don't think I can share that one with you because I'm afraid of your response. And that's where it's important that if we were going to take a series of questions such as this, how can I best support you? What would you like me to start, stop, more, less, all of that kind of stuff to somebody, that we pre-frame such a conversation by saying, I really invite you to be as honest as possible because I want to learn to the best of my abilities how I can continue to learn and grow as a person. I'll do my best to not have what you share with me be turned into a shameful thing or self-judgment. Yes, I might be more sensitive about certain things than others, but I really want you to know I want you to be as honest with me as possible. Now, of course, that asks us, when we're practicing the Platinum Rule, to have the courage to be willing to face things and the impacts of certain things that we do or don't do when we're going into a conversation. Because if the person is honest with us, they might just give us the kind of feedback that make us go, fuck you, thank you. On one moment going, oh, fuck you, I don't want to hear that. The next moment going, thank you, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And that's where we're seeking to get to, is to the thank you for what people are giving to us. Remembering that whatever somebody shares with us is going to be one part perception and one part projection. And it's up to us what we take on and what things we let go of, which may be more about them than they are about us. So there's various dynamics that it's important for us to be aware of. But to practice the Platinum Rule, it begins with the humility to be willing to learn from others how we can show up in the best way possible for them, what they'd like us to do more of, less of, start doing, stop doing, and different ways that we can support them. Is this all making sense, everybody? And so what we can do with our clients is have them rehearse with us potentially the setup of such a conversation and the practicing of asking questions such as these in their own language or in a way that feels natural for them. Yeah. Now, why I've brought it first of all as if it's us going to somebody else to learn from them is not to say that it's not also our responsibility to go towards others and share with them what we would like more of, what we would like less of, what we would like them to start doing, what we would like them to stop doing, and so on. But it is saying that generally we won't have the credits in the emotional bank account to do that with them unless we've been willing to, in a sense, hold space for them to do that with us first. It's not a rule, it's just a principle. And I hope it makes sense that if we seek first to understand and then to be understood, the chances that the other person will be invested in understanding us go right up. And this is one of the great issues in so many relationships, is we start in the other spot, seeking first to be understood and then to understand. Yeah. Now, that's not always the case. I know that there is the martyr archetype, which can be out there a lot. I'm always seeking to understand. I'm always getting in the other person's world. And then if that's the case, that's something else and that's to be addressed. However, I am saying that it's important that we're aware that if we haven't been practicing that it's time for us to practice that first towards others before we're asking them to practice it with us. Having said that, we can then turn this around and so what would we do there? And it might be something to do with creating a frame in the conversation of, I've been thinking about our relationship and I recognize that there's various things that I haven't been expressing that I think will be helpful in terms of me receiving your love. I realize I haven't been adequately representing my own needs or my reactions to certain things that you do or don't do inside of our relationship. I'm nervous about this conversation because what I'm going to share could be perceived as criticism. It's really not. It's more to do with me getting as clear as possible about what my desires and even what my needs are, and doing my best to support you to understand me. And whether you can meet those needs or not, that's up to you. These are not demands. These are not you should or you have to. This is me doing my best to make myself known to you so that you have the best chance possible to be able to understand me and to join me in ways that I think that would really work well for me in our relationship. So you see what I've done there is I've tried to diffuse the fear factor of going into a conversation such as this, take down the responsibility factor for them and amplify the responsibility factor on my side. Yeah? And I'm a really strong believer that when we take a bit of time to communicate context before we go into the communication itself, we have such a greater likelihood of being able to have a true communion, a true communication that takes place thereafter. Because the question marks of why you're communicating, where this is going, what's your agenda, have all been answered, allowing the psychic central nervous system, the body mind, to calm down and go, that sounds reasonable. I would like to know what your needs and requests are, and I appreciate that you're not coming to this from a place of judgment or making me wrong, but rather from looking at what your needs and desires are from inside your own lens, from thinking about it from your own perspective. Yeah. Now, all of that being said, so then we can take questions such as this and turn them around into, as I've already said, what would I like more of? What would I like less of? What would I like us to start doing? What would I like us to stop doing, etc.? If I was to come back to the 3 I's earlier, we can also practice sharing with people, I want you to know that these are my intentions in relation to our relationship. How does that sound for you? And then we can invite people coming to the I of invitation to hold us to that. If they see us breaking our intentions, it's my intention to bring a deep level of listening to you and a real curiosity. And so my invitation is, if you sense me judging you and in a sense projecting onto you my judgments and not really listening to you, if you perceive that's what's going on, I invite you to let me know, because that's not my intention. So here's a couple of ways, again, that we can play with practicing the platinum rule in terms of sharing things which we want with others. We take those questions, how can I best support you, and turn it around to, these are some ways I believe you could best support me. And you seeing how this can now get to a more nuanced space of understanding and agreement with one another than the projection of just being in the golden rule with one another? Does this make sense? 2 people coming together and they're just practicing the golden rule. I want this, so that's the way I'm going to be to you, compared to, I want this and I'm going to express what I want as clearly as possible. What do you want? And I'm going to listen and seek to understand as well as possible. Now let's explore that together. I know that this might sound very basic. Unfortunately, this basic, simple and beautiful way of communicating with one another is actually quite rare. It's actually quite rare. So what else can we do? So one thing I think that's important to touch on is that whilst we've been talking about things, sorry, that was literally the seat underneath my bottom, not my bottom. If you heard something come up from the sound down there, sounded a little bit odd on my side. Now, one of the things one of the ways I could look at what we talked about today is they sound like intervention style conversations, big conversations which it's like, let's sit down and have a talk. But most of life is fluid and is not based on this or that important conversation. It's based on the way that we show up moment by moment in little circumstances, in relation to little issues that can grow bigger over time. And so we're not going to spend time here today in relation to that, other than to say, get your non-violent communication on. It's really important. But there's a missing step inside of NVC, I think. And not saying that this is not accounted for in various parts of the NVC community, but if you just looked at the Offener model, if you guys are familiar with the often model, which is, something happens and so you make an observation. When we had a conversation earlier about the time that we've been sharing with one another, something like that, I felt sad because need, then it goes into because I have a real need for, I don't know, what we could say is like shared quality time or intimacy or connection or whatever it is. And then we have the request. I was wondering if we could create something where every week we know that we're going to be doing such and such a thing at least once so that I can have that quality time. Now, the issue there is that very often when an observation gets tied directly to a feeling, people often hear fault inside of that. When we didn't spend time with each other again yesterday, I felt sad could be interpreted as because they were the person who cancelled, if it was somebody else who cancelled, that, oh, you're saying that I made you feel sad. But generally what's happening is there's a step which is missing, which is the story. Yeah, which can go there or can go here. When we didn't meet up with each other yesterday, I told myself that I'm not as important to you as you are to me, and I felt sad because I have a need for connection in my life, and you are that person that I'm wanting to have connection with, and it made me think that I was less important to you than I wanted to be. Do you see how that part there is responsibility? And I'm not saying that NVC misses it and that it's not accounted for in various parts of conversations around NVC, but NVC can miss it because it can say, this happened and I felt this because it didn't meet my need, and the cause of it was back up here at the observation, or the action that had taken place. And in that instance, it means that the causal agent could be the other person. But think about it. Most of the time in life, the pain that we experience is self-inflicted. Very often it is self-inflicted. It lies in our interpretation of what somebody else has done. At least this is what I've internalized over time, that when somebody else does something, it's up to me what I do with it from there. Even if somebody handed me a knife, it's up to me what I do with it. And so very often though what happens is that we leap from observation into feelings and needs and conflate whoever was involved in this as being the cause of our negative feelings and the not meeting of our needs. Having said that, it's so very important that we practice our ability to be able to say, when this happened, I felt this is what I was telling myself, and therefore this is why I felt this. What I realize is I have a need for blah, blah, blah. And then the next step is, how well can you meet that need for yourself? This is where we start getting to the diamond rule. How well can you meet that need for yourself first and foremost? And secondly, what requests could you make or what invitations could you create that gives somebody else the possibility of being able to support you in meeting that need? So for everyday life, NVC can be excellent. And I just want to be clear that this whole formula thing in relation to NVC starts to disappear the more we practice it. This is great for being able to get the fundamentals down, but really where it starts to get to, at least in my experience, I've been practicing NVC for around 13 years now, and what I've found is that it doesn't necessarily work in this way. What it does work with in particular is being able to fluidly share feelings and needs and requests. Being able to say, this is what's alive for me right now. I sense that this is what the desire is inside of me. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to. And then even more important than that, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to do for myself? So we just touch on that to say that for an everyday operating system, NVC's got plenty for us. For the intervention style of going, well, let me do a reset in this relationship. Let me every now and then really check in with somebody, almost like imagine you were in a relationship and you thought of yourselves, God forbid, as a corporation. That corporation would have a quarterly review in which you go, how are things going? What do we need to start doing or stop doing? What's working well, what's not? What could we do more of? What could we do less of? Yeah. If we took this same attitude towards our relationships, whilst also, of course, having heart inside of it, then we wouldn't let things go for a long, long time and miss out on being able to catch things as they're taking place, redirect things. But for every day, we've got this, which is very, very helpful. Now, to round things out for today, which is more for my own enjoyment, because I think we've already covered the key things that we needed to in terms of this is what the golden rule is, this is what the platinum rule can look like, finding out from others and sharing explicitly with them. Just before I jump to this last thing, I just again want to say that the diamond rule is really to recognize our needs. And I love to tell this story over and over again just because it always has a powerful resonance for me. But what did Buddha have when he reached enlightenment? So the story goes. Did he have a relationship? Mm-mm. Did he have a house? Mm-mm. Did he have a 401k? Like, did he have retirement savings? Mm-mm. Did he have money at all? No. Did he have a fancy wardrobe? No. He had one, ratty kind of dhoti or something like that, a robe that was actually, so the story says, salvaged from a corpse. He had no house. He had none of the things that you and I talk about as being the basic necessities. None of them. Yeah. And why do I say all of that? Because he was still whole and complete. And what it means is that it's a powerful example, even if it's only symbolic, that the lion's share of everything we will need, we already and always have right here in our consciousness, right here in this body mind, right here in the delicious experience of breathing, right here, right now, already. Most needs met, if only we have the skill and presence to frame our experience of the moment in terms of how are my needs being met right now, or how else could I meet them? And this is the diamond rule, is recognizing that we have that solid, shining core already stable there at the deepest level of consciousness, and that we can practice the diamond rule with others by supporting them to find that within themselves. So we can touch back on that. But I did want to add, even though it's kind of time, just the spaghetti. I wanted to make sure that you guys get an extension on your 5 love languages, because a lot of people are locked into the 5 love languages, and I've for quite some time felt like they're an inadequate representation of the different ways that we can express love to one another. Not that they're not awesome. I love the 5 love languages, and I love that when we take the 5 love languages and turn them into the 5 self-love languages, that's a powerful thing to do. That's a way of practicing it as the diamond rule right there. But number 1, space. Yeah? What do we usually see? We see quality time. But who here can appreciate in a relationship that your partner can say, what space do you need? Or that they give you the trust to go and have the space and time that you need to focus on yourself outside of the relationship. And how many times have you met somebody where the best thing for them when the shit's going down is that they have the time and space that they need to be able to come back having had the conversations with themselves? Can you see how that can be a love language? Even when you're there wanting to connect, wanting more of them, that you give them the space. That's a love language. It's a tough one to practice for some of us. Next, we already got this one down, but physical touch. Yeah, super common. We're mammals. We have warm bodies. Most of us want to feel cuddles. Yeah, all of that. Next, we already know about this one. Acts of service. Often joke about this, but it's real. If I wanted to get my wife excited, I'll go and do the dishes. Because she liked acts of service, something that stops her from having to do something later. That's a very helpful thing for her to receive as love. We all love acts of service in our own way. Now, gifts, great. So we can be clear about what gifts we may want to give or receive. Next one. This is the one where I've taken a bit of liberty in terms of creating a whole phrase around it. But if you want, so for some people, the most powerful expression of love is to say that you're going to do something, honoring our word, so it means, how do we practice it? We say to somebody, I'm going to X. And what do? X. And that builds the most sacred of, it empowers the most sacred of qualities, or the most important of qualities inside of any loving relationship, which is trust. And so honoring our word is the H of spaghetti. Okay, so this one here is often called words of affirmation, but they're not just words of affirmation. We can think about encouragement more broadly, that we can encourage people in terms of you can do it, or that was wonderful what you did. I know it does fit inside of the affirmation space as well, but it brings somebody to their heart power, the courage element inside of that word. So encouragement is something else that we can do. Then, time. This is the inverse of that space and time. Here we're talking about quality time together, finding out for somebody else, what does that mean to you, quality time, and then doing that together. The next one is truth. This is a love language, the ability to share our truth unguardedly. This is what I've been perceiving about you, about us, about me. That one can cut through just about anything. Yeah, if you share your truth, well, that is what people are aching for. And truth and trust, we can see how close they are to one another, just in the feel right there. And then finally, the final love language brings us back to where we started in some ways. And that is asking questions. Asking questions about them, how they see things, what they think, what's been going on, what do you feel? Yeah, so there's a variety here that you can see that lie inside of the communication space, such as the encouragement, such as the truth and inquiry in particular. But spaghetti here gives us a range of other ways that we can, in a more nuanced kind of way, express what our needs are in relation to love. Do we have space needs? Do we want more encouragement? Do we feel concerned because there hasn't been a commitment upheld in terms of honoring word? Are there particular actions someone could take that would express love to us, and so on? And so, so this is this weird acronym that I've got here that can be helpful in terms of practicing the platinum rule, in terms of supporting others to be able to love us, and also finding out from them, do you need more space? Is there things that I could do in terms of physical touch? What kinds of acts of service could I do for you? Is there anything I could do to support you at the moment that would lighten your load? Are there any gifts I could get for you, etc.? How do you feel about my relationship to my word? I want you to know I'm going to do my best in relation to my word. What would you like to be encouraged by me in relation to? What would you like to do in terms of shared time together? Would you like to hear what's been honestly going on for me lately, etc., on the truth side? And then finally, are there any questions? This might sound weird as a question, but is there anything you would like me to ask you about? So in recap for today, where have we been? Oh, that's right. I didn't in the end go into conscious communication, although we've been exploring the kind of core elements of it in a variety of ways. But we've gone through, sorry, my mouse is just playing up for me a little bit here right now. But yeah, we've gone through looking at the 3 eyes of possibility, the golden rule, how that can be extended into the platinum rule in an intervention kind of sense, as well as in terms of the more everyday kind of aspect that we might see in NVC. And then we've also touched upon life languages. So that's really what I've got for you for today. And I hope that it's put your mind in a good space in relation to how you can bring the best of yourself to others in relationship. those of you, just part of why I'm doing what I'm doing here is because I, of course, wanted to share what I feel are good things to share with whomever it is who comes along. At the same time as that, if there's anybody that you know of who you feel could do with learning these kinds of skills, or who would be turned on by being able to support other people to grow the kinds of skills that we've been exploring here today, we've just launched the Creator Coaching Program for this April for English. We've got 4 people already, but we've got another 8 spots. And so if you know anybody who would like to go on a 7-month deep dive exploring tools like this, but in a deeper kind of way, my wife and I and everybody who's part of Selfcraft, the growing family of Selfcraft, would love you to send them over in our direction. And I can promise you that we'll do our best to honor them in whatever kind of contact we have with them. Having said that, for me, I'm just honored that you guys chose to be here, or you ladies chose to be here with me today. As I love to say, we've got one major choice in life, and that is what to do with the time that we have, and you've chosen to be here. So thank you for honoring me with your presence, and I hope that I've honored you in terms of the content that I've brought to you today.